Thank you, and it's great being here. This is beautiful country. I've been up here a lot. In fact, during the Clinton cutbacks in the Army, we were all up here moving tons of the West Coast stuff to Utah. So a lot of stuff came up here. I don't know if that's good for you if we get into a nuclear exchange, but it's beautiful country up here. And in fact, I got dumped off on the curb while my better half is out looking at your natural beauty out here, hitting the parks. The bathroom is just up the hallway, in case anybody needs it or isn't familiar with the building. It was out that door and that away. The men and women's both. What I thought I'd start with is a few of the outlooks coming down the way. Now, what I mean by that is what are some of the threats to counties and the water and soil? Mainly. Most of the threats that are coming out of the Federal Register every day for the Western U.S., and we could loosely refer to it even as just within the Western Caucus, okay? And they define that as the 11 Western states. Congress has this caucus that they created. I don't know what they do, quite honestly, besides have more meetings, but they have this caucus. So a lot of issues are broke down that way. Every day the Federal Register is published, and every day that is the actions of what the agencies are going to do that day, and they typically aren't in favor, usually, of people and lower taxes and all that.
Well, the screen isn't alive.
Yeah, I just,
Okay.
yeah, and thank you. Turn it on a bit. Every day, if you go in the Federal Register and rummage through that 400 to 500 pages daily, Monday through Friday, what you'll find is, and I'm going to give you an example right here. You'll find this insane amount of actions coming from every agency, and it's broke down, of course, with the table of contents, etc., etc. This is the best way that counties and states both can get that jump on actions when an agency is doing something. And that's really critical because the timing is 9/10 of the issue. Oftentimes these actions come out and then you start feeling the bad ramifications from it, or you just get announced that from an agency or a representative of an agency that, well, here we're going to do this now, or we've made this change. And it's because back in these hundreds of pages a few months ago, they purported to ask for everybody's input and comment period, or legal justification why something should be shut down or modified, but nobody knows it typically. So what happens is every morning, this is out of the government printing office. This is the Jaguar, for instance. Now, theoretically, this Jaguar over time has metamorphosized and decided that it needs to live all over the southwestern U.S. Now, the bulk of them are in old Mexico, of course. But what I want you to do is look at some of these items here that are typical of any published comment period. Where am I at? Okay. And I have a bad habit of using too many abbreviations, so interrupt me if I do that, to tell you what an abbreviation is. And I have a bad habit of pointing on my computer screen and saying, see this right here? And I know you can't, so just tell me, Doyle, you're pointing at your screen again. I'm not going to get mad. But up there where my cursor's at, on that right, column 3, you'll see, like in this case, they have to be postmarked on or before August 9th in this particular case for the Jaguar. And when you go down here, they'll start getting into they're always for critical habitat with the species, whether it's a minnow, a weed, whatever. Mojave County, Arizona just got hit with a weed species that grabbed 10,000 acres of critical habitat. We need more of this weed, is what we're being told. Had it been commented on correctly, it wouldn't have happened. Because the weed happens to be at the entrance of all the gypsum mines. They're one of their last economic drivers there, of course, at the entrance of the gypsum mines, not just random somewhere else. And secondly, it said right in the report that BLM and the Arizona State Land Department had an illegal seed harvesting operation and selling seeds to nurseries. They didn't read it. They should have just stopped it right there, and now they got hit with 10,000 acres grabbed in their county of tax base for critical habitat. And that was would have been an easy one to win. Now they're gonna have to go the long route, court, because now it's an appeal, because it's been a final action. But if you look at this isn't uncommon. If you look at those highlighted totals, look at the land masses affected, in this case on this particular species. But they're claiming the jaguar needed 858,000 plus acres of habitat. And if you look over though, what the really bothersome one is much like what I'm seeing with the prairie dogs and greater and lesser sage grouse and various species in the West, is this attack that's consistently increasing now is on private property, getting wrapped up in critical habitat. This jaguar, this attempt, was 129,000 plus acres of private property being listed as critical habitat. It's their chart, I didn't create it. It's right here where my cursor's at. And then a lot of their methodology too, just so you know, will be, now this is not common here where they give you hectares and acres both. A lot of times they're just hectares only. So it's 2.47 acres. So if you ever have to do that conversion, they're doing a lot of that stuff because of the amount of international ownership back and forth on a lot of our property that's being collateralized and sold, etc. They're doing a lot of metric system analysis anymore. But you can see there 129,000 acres of critical habitat being on private in these, broke down by these units throughout the state. And of course they'll give you a map, etc., etc. Now what was interesting, when we were down in Garfield County, I don't know, a couple months back, I wanted to show them, they asked actually, well, let's see a Federal Register today. So I pulled it up. I had already done it that morning. And we went down there and they were actually listed for an action, an NGO, non-governmental organization, and they're typically far left, almost most of them, had put their actual downtown, just a block away from where we were meeting, into an historic, they applied it to an historic district. So this county seat, I'm sitting in their building, and just a block away, their entire downtown would be impacted with building restrictions, the whole 9 yards. What materials you can use, what colors of paint are allowed to give this aura of this historic district, and to change it back. And this was put in by a third party applicant through the agencies and made it clear to the point of this final period for comments, the last 30 days. And so they got quite a surprise there in their class. Now I'd already checked this morning, so I got hold of it Saturday for today, because see the Fed's psychic, and they already knew Saturday what they're going to do today. So it was already published. So you guys weren't listed today, so we don't get to give you any magic Paiute surprises today. But you have been in recently a few times.
So is there an index you check, or how do you don't go through the whole 400 pages, or how do you do that?
Okay, depending on the client, because I have clients in the Western U.S. caucus and different counties, depending on what their emphasis is, I have a whole list of keywords for each client. So in the medical lab research industry, I will look for different words and phrases or common problems that they face that are totally different than, let's say, grazing and water. So when I'm looking each morning for Apache County, every morning, I've got to look at things like Apache. Just type in Apache, Zuni, Navajo, Hopi, get all the 7 tribes we have first off. And then Apache, when I'm doing that tribe, I get my county name as well. Then start looking up Habitat Arizona, Critical Habitat Arizona, and just keep cross-referencing the document. And then whereas Catron County's different, etc. So yes, you have to come up with a program. Otherwise, you're going to have a really slow go at reading 400 pages roughly every morning. So you're going to have to come up with something that's more indicative of where you live. Phoenix would be vastly different than my county, for instance, what I'm going to look up. Down there, I might look up mass transit, things like that, to try to find those key indicators. Now you can dump it into any like PDF type software reader. I use Adobe Pro, but you could you can download it every morning into that, and then do a search and create a word search database based on your circumstances, if you so desire. That would allow you to have a whole list of terms that typically impact your area. So you could look up lesser prairie chicken, blue grouse, loach minnow, spike dace. They love those two to attack water. Typically, spike dace, loach minnow, willow flycatcher, those animals to attack grazing water, at least more so where we are in New Mexico. That's about the only way you can do it quickly. And you'll get a lot of, if you do something generic like Garfield, I was showing them how they're going to have to refine it a bit when I was down there. Because you can get Garfield in multiple places around the U.S. Town names, multiple counties, even in different locations. So you're just going to have to come up initially with what are the issues that are typically impacting you. And I'm going to show you a little later another tip on how to do that. Now, so with that in mind, okay, now you know where most of the actions come from. Every day those will be listed. Now I want to show you some of the things that are coming your way that are more agency specific, that I believe will help you out quite a bit. This is a document we got hold of in January. Now I got a couple magazines to publish it in February, which is pretty good. I'm proud of them. The Westerner and whatnot. What this is the Fish and Wildlife Service's next 5 years species listings. Okay, what they've done, so you have a little history, is par for the course. The groups like the Wild Earth Guardians, Defenders of Wildlife Center, and the CBD, Center for Biological Diversity, they will oftentimes do their notice of intent to sue on an agency. At that point, once you issue that, the agency has 60 days to try to avoid the lawsuit and the litigation behind closed doors. And what has become the norm now is not just avoiding a piece of litigation, but the agency making full-blown settlements behind closed doors, out of the scope of any congressional hearing, publication, anything, okay? Any public comment periods whatsoever. What came out of one in 2010 was a thing called BioBlitz by the groups. Okay, that's their own name. They bragged about it. They went after 750 species in the West. And here's how it works. You have this little office of, let's say, some nice folks in Phoenix with Fish and Wildlife Service. And they get all these applications come in. By law, they have 90 days to have a draft management plan proposal published for public comment, or they fail. And in which case they can be litigated. And then you issue your notice of intent to sue, and if they fail to satisfy the group and they move on to litigation, you can start applying for all that magic money, EJA funds, etc., which then that's you paying for their lawsuit, okay? Equal Access to Justice Act, sorry, I was doing that already, EJA. So what happened is several of the prominent groups, which centered around the Sky Islands Alliance, the Wild Earth Guardians, Defenders of Wildlife, and the Center, they proposed 1,200 species, 750 in the Southwest, 1,200 cumulatively in the West, in every state. The agency, they know the agency can't process those, so they're going to automatically go behind closed doors. So the group said, we won't sue you if by 13 you will publish a chart of when you are going to list all these species. So they got their species listed without the potential to list for critical habitat and threatened and endangered uplisting, using loopholes in the process without going through the normal comment periods. See, now it won't even go. Now they're skip scoping reports, skip the initial scrutiny to save the tax dollars, to let the public, the cattle grazers, the livestock, I should say, more importantly, in general, comment, the water users like irrigation districts or cities and counties and states, to comment and shut a plan down in its scoping phases. Early on in the process, when they haven't wasted too much of your money on it, and we don't waste a lot of time on it down the road. They've avoided all that, and this was the result of one of them. This is a publication of some 500 plus, this chart. And what it shows you is the Fish and Wildlife Service's plans. Now, it gives you the species name, of course, the package they call it, and that's because 9 pocket golfers species. Here's 2 Sierra plants. They know they're going to get 2 Sierra plants, so we're talking about the Sierra Mountain Range, okay, west of all of us. 2 pine rockland plants, that's Florida, bushes, etc. They'll also always give you the scientific name and then the location. You can see where the states it'll occur in. Of course, the Gunnison's here and whatnot, and 13. And then which U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service region is going to be in charge of it. So like your Gunnison, of course, is Region 6, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. But this is very bothersome, and I hope that all of you will take into account the fact that this is just one chart published this year to satisfy the first backdoor deal. The next 2 deals will come out, and you'll see the rest of the 1,200 species. Okay? This is only around 500, this chart. And it's just point blank. Fiscal year 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. You can look it up by year or area, whatever you like. And you can look it up, here's my cursor over here, if it's going to have full critical habitat, what kind of status it's going to get. Now, a lot of them are so new that they don't even have true scientific names yet for them. So on the Big Island, this has no common name yet, but there's a scientific name. And what often happens in these cases is you have illegitimate subspecies and distinct population segments, they call them. So you'll see in these reports in the Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, Bureau of Reclamation, etc., when they publish these reports in the Federal Register, you'll see them use DPS and all these, distinct population segment. And then they'll start saying, well, this isn't just a gray wolf anymore. This is now the southwestern gray wolf because it lives south of I-10 and north of I-40. Now I'm giving you a real example from December where I live. This wolf was Mexican gray wolf here. And it went and crossed I-40 at Sanders and became the southwestern gray wolf. Science does not work that way. Any geneticist will tell you, any zoologist will tell you, but litigation does, with the agencies, that is, and the notice of intent to sue. So we were able to get that plan luckily defeated because it took in all of West Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona seamlessly, clear to the Nevada border. Now, one thing to be leery of too, when you are finding these things, however you decide to do it, if you're going to have an employee that you're just going to task every day, if you choose to do anything, to check the Federal Register, highway issues, budgetary issues, whatever it might be, from these various thousands of agencies out there. One of the key things to remember is that comment period, where you got to send the comments to, because quite often it's not your local place. A lot of the agencies are doing electronic only. So you might know that your regional office is at so-and-so address because you've been there, you've written them before. Don't count on that being where you mail your stuff, because some of them are going to electronic uploads only at regulations.gov, it's called. It's a website, and you have to look up a docket number, just like any other case, and upload for that. Keep those in mind, and please get involved. If you find any of these, get your local users, whoever it's impacting, involved, because it carries a lot more weight when you write your commentaries, or if you desire to, or do your county or city actions, or hold a public hearing, or a joint public hearing with the agency if you choose to go that route, if you have the impacted users there. So if it's a grazing allotments and water, like last year, the Forest Service decided to rewrite the entire appeals process for grazing allotments. So how does a permittee, when they want to go into an appeal because they don't agree with the decision at the district or supervisory level, how do they go through the appeal process? And the U.S. Forest Service in Washington, D.C. nationally went and rewrote the whole appeals program last year. And it allowed third parties to intervene that had nothing to do with it. To bring in an attorney, sit in the room, and be part of the arbitration, instead of just the ranger and the permittee. It allowed a third party to come in. And that was stuck in there intentionally because of NGOs again that want to sway public policy, but not in the light of day, not through legitimate bona fide debate. They want to sit in there, and in fact it was promoted as being the most healthy change they could do to the appeals process since FLIPMA, which was 1976. Those that said that statement and promoted it, of course, was the Center, the Wild Earth Guardians, and Defenders of Wildlife, because now they could be that third party sitting in there arguing against a permittee, okay, on their allotments. So that's a great time to bring in your local cat if you're going to hold a public hearing, or you want some public support on an issue before you comment to the agency, and you probably are lacking numbers. Nobody in this room can know everything. You've got to worry about a lot of parts of your job, and you can't be a zoologist and a riparian habitat specialist and a social economist all at once. So bring them in, because they can give you numbers that will help make your case if you desire to take something on, and bring you that support from organizations. So we routinely work in concert in the southwest area where I live, because I border and touch New Mexico. And the Navajo Nation is half my county, so I routinely involve the Hopi and Navajo and Apache land use groups, as well as Catron County, so the Gila Cattle Growers Association, and in our case, the Arizona Cattle Growers, if it's a grazing or water issue. Because what you'll find is typical attacks and made-up subspecies and made-up locations becoming the norm. 2 months ago, we had to mess with the Mexican jumping mouse and the New Mexico jumping mouse. Okay? So this jumping mouse needed all these 11 and 30,000 acre chunks. And they were all in allotments on the forest and all at headwaters. They didn't live any other field, only in those primo places. Here's the problem: once you start digging on that one, you find out that this is the third naming. It had been the deer mouse, it had been the meadow jumping mouse, now it's the New Mexico jumping mouse. It just keeps morphing because we had beat it the last 2 times. And then we had hoped, us and the Gila cattle growers, that goes all the way through the Gila wilderness down to the mining districts like Silver City, New Mexico, we thought, okay, we're done with this. Deer mice and meadow mice and all that. No, they renamed it and brought it out again. Another tactic that we're seeing a lot of is translocation. And I'm going to show you a listing of translocation permits in Utah, because this is bad. When you see people getting permits in the Federal Register, and what I'm noticing all over Arizona is there's these firms out of Salt Lake typically that are applying all over the western U.S. to go out and harass, that's the word they use, harvest, capture, trap, and translocate. When you translocate a known T&E species to a new area because it might have potential for habitat, keep that in mind. And when that new species doesn't die off its first week, then oftentimes what follows up immediately is now that new property is listed as critical habitat. We face that with the Three Forks spring snail and the Chiricahua leopard frog in our backyard. It's kind of like the mouse story I just told you. Somehow this Chiricahua leopard frog, and you know, Old Mexico is the Chiricahua mountain range, so it raised a red flag with us. We're like, we've never heard of this, and that's way down there anyway. And it's the size of your thumb, but it needed 330,000 acres. So, and of course, all across the allotments and the best elk hunting, our primo trophy hunt units. So, in the process, they said in the management plan that they would have to avoid all travel, all overnight camping, all recreational activities, motorized recreation, I should say, etc., etc. Grazing would have to be pulled, riparian habitats restored. So basically no use. It becomes a wilderness area without going through the process. Okay? Which again would be illegal, but they get away with it by calling it a habitat study area. They don't call it a wilderness area. Just call it something else. And manage it as such. That's what their own sentence says. Manage it as such. When we started getting there on page 28, it specifically said, this species was translocated into Apache County from the Chiricahua mountain range of Mexico. So it was in the desert mountains, which come just over the border down by Yuma somewhat, and then translocated, so transplanted, up to where we're at 9,000 feet, and it froze to death. So they replanted it again, and it froze to death. Well, that's because God didn't want it there, okay? So it's summer, this is winter. But they did that 4 years in a row, and because it froze to death every winter, it must be endangered. So now we're going to go after critical habitat, because we can't keep it alive. I'm not exaggerating. And the Three Forks spring snail, none of us had heard of that. Same thing. We have Three Forks River, which we love to trout. It's primo grazing country and hunting country. And prize trout fishing. And in fact, it goes low quick enough that on the San Carlos, for $8, you step over their boundary and go down a little lower. And the same day that you did browns and Apache trout, you can be doing smallmouth bass and crappie. So it's a nice watershed. They didn't have a name for the snail when they translocated it. The agency admitted to us, so they just named it after the body of water they dumped in there. That's where it got its name. Three Forks spring snail. But again, like a map or like a body of water you dump it in, that doesn't make it a species all of a sudden. And it doesn't mean it belonged there. But these are becoming the norm anymore in the Federal Register. And the attacks are incessant. And I want to show you these listings real quick, but you had your hand up, sir.
On the new Forest Service,
Mm-hmm.
who do they appeal to? Who would,
So,
like a grazer, who do they appeal
okay, well, typically when a permittee would go in and, okay, the ranger, let's say a district ranger or range con made a decision. Then they didn't like it, so there was an appeals process. And the permittee would say, well, let's talk about this. We're going to sit down and have a formal appeals process in your office. Pretty low key, generally, of course, in favor of the federal government, but it was pretty normal. The new system that was promulgated last year was you could bring in a third party. It's still in the district ranger's office, but a third party, when they see it noticed that there's going to be an appeal, they're allowed to step in and sit in the meeting and even offer commentary to it. So, here's what happens. You have the Sky Islands Alliance or the Wild Earth Guardians, or those types that have offices all over America. There's a roster. Whenever there's an action or appeal, you can see in the register who's doing it. You know, Wink Krigler at X Diamond Ranch. And here's the action on this permit so-and-so. They can now sit in there and actually offer commentary as a total third party. They don't even have to be from our state of Arizona. And sit in there and offer commentary into the hearing that used to be handled at the local level only, where it should be.
So, yeah, I guess what I was looking at it is, so now the Forest Service makes the rules. I mean, Congress gives them blanket authority to make the rules. So they're making the rules,
Mm-hmm.
they're enforcing the rules,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're litigating the rules.
Yeah, and typically not even litigating it. Okay, the USDA will get some measure of authority through a congressional charter, the Organic Act, the Weeks Forestry Act, and it goes on and on and on. Okay, the agency will produce a handbook. Now remember, the NEPA and congressional acts trump their handbook. They don't like to think that way, but it's a fact. So they'll generate rules, they claim needful rules and regulations that they need to fulfill their job. Every time they're threatened with one of these notice of intent to sue, an OIS from a group, they'll go into that 60-day backdoor thing, and they're going to do whatever they can to avoid litigation. And that's where they make these settlements that have no public comment, they're never posted, nothing becomes of it for the public or local government to even protest. And then that'll come up with a new rule, or they'll modify an existing chapter. And that's how they keep changing so-called land management policies on the public lands. So they end up judge, jury, executioner, the USDA Forest Service.
In my junior high civics class, I understood there were three parts of government.
Yeah.
Checks and balances.
Yeah.
Obviously with the Forest Service, that's gone away.
Yes. And the same with most agencies. I hate to pick on the Forest Service because I have a fair amount of friends in there who help me a ton. And they've needed help, and our county's been able to step in and help the Forest Service a ton in our backyard where they've called us for help. And so we built our relationship, but you can't help but start being sour on the agencies when they continually side with outside interests against your local citizens or the only jobs you have. Yes, sir.
So, we've got a situation probably coming up here, but during, if there's an appeal filed by the ranchers, say, got a, day you emphasize, the third party can also be, say me. If I want to be the third party, I could probably go there and make a comment, right?
Yep. You probably should.
So it can come either way.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing is that rural counties and the livestock producers or mining or any of these industries or your hunting groups and recreation all throughout the West, we're not near as organized or quick as the people that would like to see a lack of production or a hands-off attitude on the land. To give you an idea, we know how bad the gray wolf program is, and we can prove it scientifically over and over again. Last, 2 weeks ago would have been the cutoff for one of 3 items in the Federal Register, and in this case, it was the 10J experimental non-essential. Keep those words in mind. Experimental and non-essential both in one sentence. Mexican gray wolf. The comments closed. I'm looking through. Okay, they've got the Hopi Economic Development who had me write for them. They've got the Hopi Ranching Operation, Mojave County, Apache County. Okay, everything I uploaded and got e-receipts for is listed. And then there's 96,000 for the wolf. Coming out of San Francisco, Norway, Greenland, Canada. All these people are allowed to comment, mind you. And it came via newsletters that I got to read myself from the center and various groups where they just give bullet talking points to their members. And remember, when the center passes the hat once, if every person just throws in $1, it's a saying we joke about, they've got 250,000. That's how many members are on their email list. So they know not everybody's going to write, but they're going to get a good percentage of them to comment. So they send out these bullet point lists and basically say, include one of these sentences, and here's a link, click on it and upload it, put your name down. So instantly us local governments were overwhelmed with 96,000 other comments saying the wolf's great. They don't live there. They haven't lost any cattle to it. Their children haven't been chased by it, of course. But it's great, and you need to keep it dumping them in these people's backyards. Okay, so that's... If you can keep on top of it, get in there and go in there if the rancher will allow you to go in there, like on your AUM case you brought up, mentioned right now. Go in there. Now, not every district has, of course, facilitated that yet, but what we try to do is, as a county, we know we have livestock operators. So, as a county, when the... I don't know what that is, so we'll... Some nature screensaver, evidently. In that case, when we saw the revisions, the first thing we did was said Arizona Cattle Growers, Ranching Heritage Alliance, that's our local group, Gila Cattle Growers, because they're New Mexico, but remember, we touch. So half of my town is running New Mexico plates. They may live in New Mexico, but every bit of their work and shopping is where I live, in Arizona. So they're important to us. It doesn't matter if they're another state or county. They're spending their money there, and a lot of our folks are grazing in New Mexico side of the line. So we try to inform them immediately, try to cost share. So if the Arizona Cattle Growers or Gila Cattle Growers is busy, they'll be like, well, send us what you got when you're done, because we're over here litigating right now something else. And we'll put it on our letterhead or take from it, whatever. Or we'll write it for you, you go handle this other issue right now. So try to network if you can with those that are going to be impacted and try to cost share. We found that to be very effective. And again, you find out you can dig out a lot of numbers that you didn't expect. Okay, on this wolf issue, as soon as we were able to discover a few critical things, Wildlife Services, APHIS, most people know them as Wildlife Services, they're the folks who go out and trap and shoot. In 2006, they admitted that the predatory animals, typically in the canid species and the predatory species, are carriers of bioterrorism agents. And they published it, and then it kind of just went away. Then, in the spring, at the Special Operations Summit in Maryland, we get told, hey, look at these new documents that just came out. We grabbed them from Al-Qaeda. They've targeted and been able to purchase these 30 key diseases that are deadly to humans. And they published in their own magazine, much like they did the Fire in the West publication, which Al-Qaeda did as well. They published that, hey, we got a great way. We'll just use rats and coyotes and wolves and everything to spread disease to population centers. And we don't even have to be there or try to fly a plane into it. Okay, so this is proven facts. And then here we are introducing a wolf that we find out carries all 30 of those species, 26 of which are deadly to humans. So I would have never known that had I not ran into a PhD geneticist and zoologist by networking from the county. And they said, oh yeah, here's all those white papers we wrote. We wrote them 5 years ago and presented them to Congress and they ignored it. We proved the threat. We proved they purchased the diseases. We proved that they're sitting in Venezuela with them. North Korea provided them. And we proved that the very critters the Fed is dumping in there with your money carries those diseases. So we have our own agency. I'm not going to say helping Al-Qaeda, but they sure aren't making it any harder on them one bit when we already know a published plan. Okay, I would have never known that had it not been for networking. Now let me show you this Utah listing. So you guys, before we go to a break or so here and we get into some of what we've done in our area that's legal and proven. Oh, translocations. Now, what you'll find here, and this is bothersome, is these aren't the private ones, so there's a mixture I'll be showing you. But you'll notice Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, capture, handle, release, blah, 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 and they'll tell you the species. Here's the BLM, Utah State Office. Now, I know you've ran into them before. They often say, well, we're Arizona BLM when you run into them in Phoenix. We don't have BLM, and you don't either. I mean, they're the federal BLM, and they are running the Utah office, for instance, the branch office. But they when they introduce themselves, they sound like they're like one of your state agencies oftentimes. Here's the State University Ecology Center. Then I have several from this NGO that exist out of southern Utah. There was a Wilderness Alliance or something or other I keep running into out of southern Utah. And then another one out of Salt Lake besides these state agencies. Be very leery of those, because when they start capturing and translocating them, someone is going to be right on their heels listing that area as critical habitat. I haven't seen a case where they haven't. They don't just move it for the heck of it because they wanted to spend some extra funds into a new area.
Doyle, do they have to have a permit for that?
They're supposed to, yes.
Who would issue and what's the...
U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
And do the state fishing games have a role in this?
Mm-hmm. On many projects, they're called joint lead. So they run as a joint lead agency. Right now, for instance, it's kind of a twisted chain of events, but Bureau of Reclamation had done some trout dams or fish barriers in a stream. And because they altered the stream flow in this blue wilderness and the blue vista at the bottom of my county and then Greenlee County and the San Francisco Basin River, the famous one, that triggered wild and scenic byways if someone applied. The week after they built the fish dams, the Wild Earth Guardians put in the whole river system for wild and scenic byways designation. And that stops all grazing allotments, riparian activities, motorized travel, etc. for the whole basin. Problem is, Bureau of Reclamation doesn't have to administer that. It's assigned to the Forest Service from Congress to administer. So now a party that you hate and yell at in the meeting didn't even cause the problem, but they were ordered to administer it, and they'll typically get a joint lead, and in this case, the Arizona Game and Fish jumped on as joint lead agency. So, and the loach minnow and spiked dace, which are two species in the water, aquatic species. The willow flycatcher, the bird, is a common bird one used in grazing areas, and it's escalating tremendously now. It's spread heavily out of New Mexico, Arizona, and hitting Nevada, Utah, Colorado heavy now as far as listing to impact grazing in water areas. Those ones there, you already have a spiked dace and loach minnow designation on the book saying that this might be a T&E species, threatened and endangered, depending on where it's at. And here we find, about 6 months ago, we find out from the Forest Service, we had just finished helping them out with an 11,000 acre timber project in December through May. So December of 12 to May of this year. And they said, hey, we got to show you this because we can't help but help you. They've been in meetings with Bureau of Reclamation. Bureau of Reclamation gave a $250,000 grant to Game and Fish Department if they'll help administer, translocate, etc., loach minnows in 11 of our biggest waterways. So they got the $250,000 grant if they'll help administer that. So our own Game and Fish Agency will take that $250,000 to put a known T&E species in all our main grazing waterways. And that's not uncommon. That's why it got to the point where the New Mexico governor, she removed the Game and Fish Department from all of the wolf activities from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service by a vote, executive order first, then a legislator also ran a bill at the same time, concurrent, to kind of back her up per se. That's how bad her Game and Fish Department was impacting the livestock growers. They were so ingrained in the wolf program with the Fed that she had to just bar her own state agency from participating with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife anymore. And it was a good move. I wish our governor had enough guts to do that. They've scared her ever since 1070. She's gotten real broke. I don't know what they held over her, but what I want to do is after, let me see, I had just a few more to show you. Recently in the news, I know this may not be a timber county strictly where I'm standing, but I don't know where everybody came from. And 2/3 of our nation's water come from forested lands. So the water is a big deal if people want to drink and eat and things like that. This was a new one that came out while Ken, Ivory, and myself were on the road floating around Arizona with the legislators. Here, I'm pointing at my screen again, September 2nd. This is on top of the other Secure Rural School Act deductions and RAC payment deductions and everything else. You can blame sequestration, you can blame whatever you want, or you can just look at the historical chart and see that it's dropped every year. That welfare program, make your lands non-productive, take this money. Now the money's going to drop every year. It's going to be a 20-year renewal. We're not going to do the 20-year renewal. You might get a 1-year extension. I mean, that's the point we're at now. That's how quick it evolved in 5 years. This is on top, this new reduction announced is on top of all the other reductions. Now, I'm sure all of you remember the USDA saying, well, we want a portion of our money back that we sent out to your states, and states bucked them, which was good to see. 19 states teamed up immediately and said, you're not getting your money back. It's our money. You took it and give back a portion is the reality. So they just did cuts a different direction. This was the first week of September, and that's throughout the West, and you're one of those states. And so I can show you, I guess we'll pick on, I don't know, what's a good county to pick on in Utah?
Wayne.
Okay. Do I get to pick on Wayne all day, or
Yep.
Are you volunteering? Okay. Now your cuts weren't near as bad as several people's, but this is you can get this from if you go to the House Resource Committee, but this is, sorry, I'll go back over here. State, the county, the numbers. This is each year's percentages in Secure Rural Schools Act and RAC payments that comes to the counties. Many counties, I know in Arizona, except for Maricopa County, the state of Maricopa we call it, that's Phoenix and all that. Except for them, all of us have suffered 50% or greater reductions. Now this one here, Wayne went 391 down to a 225, so it wasn't near as bad as us. But keep in mind that one thing on these RAC and Secure Rural Schools Act that is, it's not uncommon and it's legal. You can divert your Title II and Title III funds, like 85% to the school, 15% out roadways and different categories. I doubt anybody just takes Title I across the board and is done with it. And you can also divert legally Title III funds for, let's say, a resource coordinator in your county. The Forest Service liked having someone to go to, so did the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they're the ones, there's other counties in Northern California, also New Mexico already doing it, and that's how they fund their resource advisor. Or that's how they fund a position and hire it out. The person may not be in their county, but they might be within the state or the region.
Which funds are those?
Those Title III funds out of RAC payments. And it was actually the Fish and Wildlife and Forest Service who proposed it to my board. They said, look, we don't want Doyel going away, and every year, like, we're the same as you guys. Everybody gets in a broil about the general fund. We've got someone we can always go to who knows the background of this last 5 years of timber, or this cattle issue, or this appeals process. So why don't you guys quit worrying about it so much and just divert that 15% over to a natural resource specialist? And that gave the Navajo, which is 2/3 of my county, a real breather. They were like, oh, okay, that's cool, because you got to live there to understand what I'm saying. But they were real happy because they felt like we weren't stealing their money out of the Navajo's money out of the general fund. And they're great guys, but sometimes there's that perception. Our county's split down the middle, like a north-south situation. And then it let the county manager be real happy, because he was like, okay, we don't have to come up with so much out of the general, and they get their raises and this rack that we weren't even fully utilizing. Another thing we do typically, which after break I'll show you some of these projects that have been highlighted. Most recently, one of our rack projects. The Forest Service had some needs, and we had some mutual needs. We had this community that half burned down in the record-setting fire, 856,000 acres. And half of the community survived. This one particular community, Greer. And all beside it, they had no plan to do anything, thinning or anything. So where we stepped in and got the money from the fire and fuels team from the Forest Service, transferred to the county to cut, and then the next 800 acre section just north of it, which we called Slade Reservoir or Benny Drainage. I can even show you the maps. What we did there is they wanted to reduce the fuel load there by town. Those are your good guys. These aren't your litigants. These are your foresters that believed when they went into the job they were going to help trees and people fish and hunt. There are still a fair amount of them left in back offices. They're not in the front anymore. So what we did in the RAC meeting was, besides them voting for some roads we needed that mutually tied together forest ranger districts across county properties, so they didn't have to maintain it, the county did. We also allotted a large portion of our RAC project money to those fire and fuels treatments so that the Forest Service team could complete them. Where did we benefit? It's the headwaters of the Little Colorado River. It's the headwaters of Government Springs. It's our 3 reservoirs for all our ag. Literally is within like vision distance of this timber project. And it's lined with private property whose barbed wire fence is the forest border, which only has one highway in and out. And I don't mean a loop either. It's in or out. So if anything burns, you're trapped in this town. So we won health, safety, welfare, protect our waters, and our agricultural irrigation users. They won because they got the project done. So you don't always have to just send the RAC strictly to here. Okay? Be a little creative if you find a friendly in one of these agencies around you. Then I guess if you find that you don't have any friendlies at all, then be creative in making sure you get all the funds to utilize best for your people. And they don't get any of them for parking lots at trailheads, whatever your case might be. I want to take a quick break here, and I want to show you some of the activities, the citations that were out of the floors of Congress and hearings and in the newspapers. I don't have a picture. We just debuted our 5th new mill. It's a high-speed HUSAW unit that moved in from the state of Washington, and Ann Kirkpatrick's our U.S. Congress lady. The front page had a picture of her tour and our new mill opening and blah, blah, blah. And also just 2 weeks ago, if you go to the Forestry Journal, I could show you the article, but it's not pretty. It's just an article. Our Apache Indians just are reopening their mill after 20 years. So we just had our HUSAW unit, 13,000 board feet an hour. 24 hours a day, 56 jobs just in town. That doesn't count the truckers or the timber fallers. just in the plant. And then the Apaches next, literally, that are part of our county and touch us all. We're like an in-holding my town, reopening their mill. So I want to show you some of these successes by just kind of being a little more proactive, or maybe rethinking some of the stuff that we've been able to do. I imagine most people have heard of NEPA and all that, okay? The National Environmental, now there was two actually a long time ago, Policy Act, Protection Act, but NEPA. What happens is there's, if you go look them up, and you can on the internet, the Council on Environmental Quality, and it's like an executive level branch, okay? CEQ, so just typically say that. CEQ is how you go read it often, instead of the whole thing spelled out. They promulgate NEPA, okay? So like recently, they've done a whole revision of their national planning rule, okay? Now, and that has been ongoing for a long time. It got stopped several times from proceeding forward. 89, 2001, 97, 98, 2010, and they finally got through with this revision. But remember this, when you're dealing with an agency person who's not being very understanding locally with you, okay? And they say, well, our handbook, we have this and we have that. Just remember this, forget their handbook. Okay, congressional law, real law, and CEQ and NEPA trump their handbooks. Their handbooks are guidance for their employees, and that's it. They can't write law at the local ranger office. They can't just change AUMs and change the whole process for the region, nor can your regional officer. All of it has a process, and those processes come about initially, theoretically, in the scoping process. And in scoping, if this was a perfect world, they would, early in the process, that's their own words, come to the local governments, tribal governments, impacted users. So let's say water users, irrigation, alfalfa operations, the county seat, and say, hey, we got this idea to put these fish dams upstream. We need you at the table. Is this meeting a good date to kick this off? Now this is an ideal world. Now typically though, what actually happens is it makes it clear to publication, the thing you saw in the Federal Register, and you're stuck at the tail end in the comment period. So that's one of the things you need to undermine immediately. Now, don't just write though, when you write as a county, or an individual, or a trade organization, don't just write, well, I don't like the sage grouse because it's ugly, or I just don't want it here. There's a thing called substantive commentary, and it's a requirement of NEPA. So you're building your case, okay, in other words. Okay, now first off, part of that case is building that administrative record. So right off the bat, when you find an action published in the Federal Register and you say, hey, this is not good to our livestock and grazing out here, we're going to write this local, because we know they got an office up the way. And then they write you back and say, we're not meeting with you, or we don't have time, or we'd love to meet with you, but we're not going to consider your input. We've already written the plan. Keep that. Keep that correspondence, because you're building that administrative record, okay, to reference later on if you ever have to go to appeals. And there's two routes to appeals. Now when you are actually looking at a plan, like I showed you that listing for the Jaguar, I showed you some translocations, etc. Let me show you a few key things just right down here, and it'll be on the screen in a minute. Because this is just bizarre, but unless I show it to you, you can't get the full weight of it. And I just figured you didn't want to see all my 8,000 files. Okay, my land use and water and jurisdiction, just to give you an idea, just that one folder is 150 gigabyte on here, 32,000 items. So I had to have folders, so I figured you didn't want me rummaging through all of it. Okay, the Apache Sitgreaves Forest is where we live. Every forest in the nation was theoretically mandated 6 years ago, well, in 06. So, you know, we'll be going on 7 years shortly from when they did it, to rewrite their forest plans. Okay, all 176 forests in the nation. Now, almost no forest said at the beginning, hey county, hey livestock, hey cities, hey whoever, let's all get together and see what we need. How have things changed? How have industries changed? What have we hurt in our old plan that we need to rectify, that we've been running under as a forest? So it's a pretty important document because remember, 2/3 of the water in America comes from forest managed land, USDA managed land, 2/3 of your water. When there's the catastrophic wildfires, like I told you about our record-setting one, our 3rd day of monsoons, we have a monsoon season, started a week at the end of the fire, when it was contained, I should say. The 3rd day of monsoons, clear down in the San Francisco River in the Gila Wilderness, all the trout floated to the top, suffocated to death in another state away in New Mexico, pushing down by the Rio Grande. So you see how big an effect it can have. 5 counties away, clear through 2 wilderness areas, and in another state in 3 days' time from silt runoff. So just because you might be in a grassland and the water's just always flowed downhill because the snowpack, you know, make sure to fully think about when there's a big fire upstream in a neighbor's county, how it might be impacting you and why that forest plan is important to you as the end receiver of that water for irrigation and for if you're a large city, of course. Pumping stations, the San Carlos Indian Reservation has to pump out of the Black River, and the 2nd day of rains, the carbon off the fire, when you see how it's like reflective, a burned log, and it seems to sparkle like fool's gold, it is abrasive like diamonds. It burned up every pump station in the San Carlos Indian Reservation and White River and Fort Apache, like the movie. There's really a Fort Apache there, and it's a pretty big place. Had no running water within 2 days. It burned up every pump station. No fire hydrants, no drinking water from a fire that wasn't even on their land. So the impact spread really quickly. We had to take this land management plan seriously. You go in, they say, hey, guess what? We've got this new land plan. So we're going to get into the substantive commentary issue of NEPA. We know we've got 45 days to respond. It was kind of a new issue for a lot of new supervisors and staff at our county for this year. It was this spring. They had just been sworn in January. So I said, look, the first thing you need to do is like get this extension request on letterhead and send it in. I'm telling you, you will not be able to consume and comment on this plan in 45 days. And they said, why? It's like 450 pages. I said, well, that's the preferred alternative. But there's A through E alternatives. And then those are a synopsis. The agencies hire out to people that have private firms. So I'm a private firm. They never hire my type, though. They hire the people that want to think like them. And what they are allowed to do is take all the specialist reports, they're called, and those would be disciplines. That would be your range officers, your rangeland specialist, Dr. George Rule at ASU. He might do all the grass height and write a specialist report. The social economics, riparian, aquatic, air quality, soil, recreation, transportation. Okay, so you can see how this piles up. Then they hire out to a firm to write a synopsis, and that's what the public gets. The problem is that firm will often write that synopsis based on more of a driven agenda than what was actually said by the scientist. For instance, we found where this roadless network in the Gila Wilderness had to occur in all the surrounding areas around the Gila Wilderness, and every district had to do an 86% reduction in all road networks to help the spotted owl. Yet when we went to the terrestrial, aquatic, and all the habitat specialist reports, they had analyzed the current system that needed the 86% reduction, and all the specialists said the current road networks have no impact on the T&E species or the spotted owl. Yet in the final summary, they make sure to write that if we don't reduce it, we're going to impact the spotted owl. The scientists never said it. So get those extensions right off the bat, because when you start digging, suddenly that for public consumption report that was 75 pages at the front desk is only a portion of 400. It's only a portion of 5 alternatives. And you have to go to the specialist reports to be able to comment with substantive commentary as required by law. Our forest plan was over 3,700 pages. So then the new elected person saw quickly when I gave him the stack, and I went to the supervisor's office and said, well, I want a disc and a printed set, so don't bother me, just give it to me. You know, about the cost of printing. And so that's not my problem. You decided to write it, I want it. Because some people can consume it better if they can highlight, and others like their computer screen. So I'll get both versions, depending on your staff needs or desires. Once the...
Doyle, let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
The Utah forests are going under the new planning rule, not under the 82 rule that you guys were. So we'll not be facing this anytime soon.
Yeah, sure. You're rhetorical or you're asking?
I'm making a statement.
Oh.
They're continuing to amend current forest plans, but not revising them.
To the new rule, the new national planning rule.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it isn't gonna come out anytime soon, so.
Mm-hmm. So they're just gonna keep doing amendments to your current forest plan. I would hammer them. Because the amendments are probably, you probably didn't help at the table, write them.
We've been through two or three different cycles of various rules, but it hasn't come to any point. So they've decided just to wait until the malaise is over.
That, I don't think that's healthy.
I'd agree.
So, at all. Well, I'm glad that we were able to kind of urge ours to get the dang thing published. Now, keep in mind though, some things to look for. What we immediately found was when I went to the aquatic and the rangeland and the range management sections. I'm curious, all this water and global climate change, I want to see their bin. Because in the opening statements, they said we have to revise our forest plan to adapt to coming climate change. So they've already accepted it. There's no proof for it. They've just made it a statement and we're going to rewrite the plan. No, I'm saying they haven't proven it. Now, what you believe in your life, and we might get into that debate there and set it break, but what you believe in your own life, but they have to prove it if they're going to make it a fundamental statement of their plan. We are going to modify what's worked since '82 because of global climate change. That's one of the reasons. Well, they better show the proof, which of course they couldn't. I went to water because of ag, irrigation, etc., recreation, and livestock. Why do we protect water so much? Some of the biggest employers in our state are the power plants and the dams, recreation. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we are the copper capital of the world. And mines need lots of water to employ those tens of thousands of people. So we have no mines in our county, but we better be able to send them good water to function. So I don't want it encumbered. They used the numbers, the Forest Service did, of this year in April of 13, they used the rainfall and precipitation levels of the highest year on recorded history since 1906 in our forest, which was 1981. They didn't use the current conditions. So when they used the highest levels of precipitation in history since 1906, this amount of water, let's say from this table to here, 30 inches per year, and we're only running on average 11. What that did was that allowed them to set the stubble and the growth heights way beyond reach for any permittee. Because they said, based on this amount of water, you can have this much grass. And if you don't have this much grass, we're not going to let you graze. That's 1981 rainfall. That's not today. Another thing we found is we just went through the record-setting fire, those 800,000+ acres I told you about. And in the timber, the recreation, the transportation, which a ton of it was flooded out with landslides, higher than this roof, the ceiling in here, I mean. They admitted that they did not resurvey. They just published it in April this year. They did not resurvey, and all the numbers for tree density, recreation, flood hazards, and fuel loads are from the record-setting fire in our history. So how scientific is that? To base a report that's going to guide you for 20 or 30 years, and a lot of the impacts to your county, recreation, mining, water, etc., grazing, to base it on numbers that are completely outdated because of catastrophic wildfires, whole road networks washed out, bridges gone. It isn't. Okay? It's not feasible, it's not proper. So those are the things when you're writing a substantive commentary to get into. And then here's something like, is that big enough for everybody? Just, let me see. So here's something like what you might end up turning in the end. My comment, because I was dealing with some 3,700 pages, the comment ended up like 82 pages long. And no, this was not fun reading all that and writing all this. But what I do is, for the social economics part, I have 2 PhDs, social economist and range economist. I have an economist in rangeland science, PhD at ASU. I have a riparian habitat, a NEPA specialist, and a technical writer in the firm. That's just like 5 that I used on this plan of 76 people. Okay, because some, if they deal with only defense industry, obviously they could care less about the timber. Okay, so pulling them in is the only way to get one of these done. Now, they gave us an extension, and we had a whopping 90 days to consume 3,700 pages, cross-check it, and write back and have it filed in time. So, of course, we appreciated the time to comment. We have the responsibility for protecting the health and welfare of our citizens, including but not limited to protecting the societal and economic impacts of Forest Service planning. Okay? Despite the fact that 2/3 of our county is sandstone and reservation. It doesn't matter. They're all using water. And they need to have mills. They may not be cutting it, but they're processing it. So, to do a substantive commentary, I always put a table of contents in, and I suggest you do that. Because remember, you're not always dealing with the brightest bulb in the closet, okay? The people reading this, I'm saying, when you turn it in. So, you should probably do it in order as they wrote it and comment to it. So do a point-counterpoint system. For it to meet the requirements of law, so that they have to consider your comments and integrate them into the revised plan down the road, or to make you have legal standing for an appeal if you want to through the Department of Justice or the Forest Service. You have 2 routes. You always have an agency. I said Forest Service in this case. And you have Department of Justice, and you can actually appeal both routes simultaneously in parallel if you want for a NEPA project. And the sheriffs and the search and rescue team and the posse, I had them help write all the transportation network stuff, because those are the folks strapped with all the lost hikers, the people that get caught in on flash floods, the people get stuck in behind wilderness areas. It's not the supervisor, and it's not the planning and engineering department or community development, and it's not the rancher. That's the sheriff who has to deal with that. So they participated in the writing of this as well, because they got to do all those search and rescue functions. So we got everybody involved to get their input besides the science side. And then here is for instance, issue, the DEIS fails to provide an unbiased presentation of alternatives, which was true. They held 5 public meetings as it for this giant report that's going to impact everybody for 20 or 30 years. They held only 5 meetings, and at every meeting when you walked in, you did not get to see alternative A, B, C, and D, and E. You got to see alternative B, the preferred alternative of the agency. That was the only booklet that was there. That was the only map present. So they didn't even show the public, who doesn't know what, let's say I might know, what their choices even were. That's typical. So we showed in NEPA 1502.2 requires, to achieve the purposes set forth, agencies shall prepare environmental impact statements in the following manner. They shall not commit resources prejudicing selection of alternatives before making a final decision. What that's called in the courts is pre-decisional. They shall not be pre-decisional. Well, when they pimp to the public, here's Plan B, here's our public meeting, they were pre-decisional. So we talked about it and proved it after we quoted the law from our problem, and then we gave them remedy. For instance, bias wording within the DEIS should be changed to present an unprejudiced selection of alternatives. The public should be aware that just because the agency perverts an alternative, that alternative may not be the best one. You go through that plan step by step. So you tell them, you can't do grass heights and stubble and grass measurements on the range surveys You can't base that on the highest rainfall on record for 1981 and ignore the current conditions. And you can't do the fuel load and timber harvesting and recreation based on pre-fire conditions after the record-setting fire burned 856,000 acres. You can't do that. Here's why. It's not the current conditions. Go back and rewrite it. And when you rewrite something that's legal and follows the law, go ahead and republish it and we'll comment again. So several times when we've had to do this, like the southwestern gray wolf, 400 in the last 4 years we've whipped. Like that Three Forks spring snail or Chiricahua leopard frog. That Chiricahua leopard frog, that area, according to the Fish and Game and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Arizona cattle growers, that area impacted was worth $250,000 to our county. And we spent $450 writing the comment to it. So it was a good investment, and that's common. And then when they realize that you've got them in a corner, and you're not just going to stand down and let them bully you around, and you have the law backing you, and you're not being unreasonable, all we're doing is telling them, go ahead and follow the law, and you better prove this point out and integrate it in the next plan, and go ahead and come talk to us again. Once you do that, they'll often just pull the plan. The comment period wasn't even over in February on the wolf, and they pulled the whole plan for 3 states in writing. And then the Federal Register published, due to commentary received from Apache County, we see no need for critical habitat in their county. The county on each side of us who said we were kooky, they got 22,000 acres of loach minnow habitat. We got none. So our cattle growers benefited, and our ag water users benefited for their downstream concho and all that. That's big hay and alfalfa operations. So I know this all sounds bizarre and stupid to most people, and I don't blame you, okay? Because it is bizarre and stupid, most of it. But there's provable science to show that, like our PhD economists, they published a paper through the University of New Mexico to show that as our rural communities in New Mexico and Arizona lost a bunch of our logging and cattle starting in the 80s, okay, with different rules and different management styles and different litigation that came down the pike. As we lost these rural jobs, there was a complete corresponding influence on juvenile delinquency, divorce rates, domestic violence, drug use, alcoholism. It could be directly correlated. Now, the long and short of it is people lose jobs, they got nothing to do all day but sit at home and get mad at the wife and whip on her, or the kids aren't in a good environment and they start acting up. The law enforcement realizes that. Our PhDs proved it though, with all the statistics, and showed it. So you have a valid reason as a county to be engaged, okay? To protect your backyards. And it's, welfare is not just economic welfare. It's in fact, the police powers of the state, where you derive that power from, is defined as health, safety, welfare, and morals. That's the 4 things for the police powers of the state. So this is just a few things that we've done that were successful, and we've had some big pitfalls. One of the pitfalls was on a water project, we brought in too many people by accident. We just didn't know what was going to happen. And on a major watershed all the way through us, the Nutriosa watershed, the San Francisco, everything, the TEP, one of our big power producers, and SRP in our state, and provides throughout the Southwest and clear to California and Nevada power to them from us. We had too many players in it, okay? And what we had done was the Forest Service, in this case the Alpine Ranger District uphill from me, needed a lot of water riparian area fixes. Now this benefits the cattle, the recreation, everybody, and the irrigation ag users. So we wanted to see it done. They're broke. I went and got money from the State Water Board for them, and I got scientists donated to do all the water quality testing in their own labs from the power plants. But what happened is pretty soon everybody in the world showed up wanting to get in on it. The next thing I knew, I had Trout Unlimited and the National Wild Turkey Federation And everybody wanted to get in on this project. And before you knew it, we were having to make people mad because all these elements started eating up under the name of admin money. And our goal is to get that funds on the ground and do the work, not have 20 different heads shuffling paperwork. So that has had to happen 2 or 3 times, not had to happen. We've had to shut it down and kind of rethink the project and start back at square one again. So I'm just giving you a warning from some of our bad experiences. It's amazing how quick people came out of the woodwork and wanted to latch on to something, but of course they needed some admin money to latch on. They never just came with this free offer like it sounded up front. But nothing's free, so we should have known better. I think most people understand many of the problems that have come about to face local control and the attacks and impacts on cultural and historic uses, agency encroachment. Some of this we're going to go through fast because I want to get to some of the citations which are most important for you all. Water grabs by federal agencies, unfunded mandates, wild and scenic designations, wilderness areas that aren't really called wilderness because only Congress can approve those, no travel in quiet areas. And these are going on and on. I did a job in Kansas, and that's all grasslands, but they're still the largest grasslands in the world managed by the Forest Service in Kansas. So it's the same process, same everything, even though you can't find a pine tree out there. Okay, it still was a forest. Okay. Bioregional governance is something referred to by many of the groups, and that's why you see so many of these critters crossing state lines, and that's why so many of these, like BLM, the new land management plan, it's called the Colorado Plateau Land Management Plan. They want to do the 4 corner states as one plan, is their goal for a land management plan, the BLM. They published it in the Federal Register, and then said if you want updates, you better keep track of our site, our website, because we're not going to publish again. That's how bold some of these agencies are getting. So you start having to track these agencies all over. ESA, NEPA, flip mud, all stuff I know you've heard about before. That protection is derived from the 10th Amendment to protect the health, safety, and welfare and morals, is the full thing. And what it's called is police powers of the state. And that's relegated to the state and its political subdivisions. The best bet, honestly, is if people would, I put band together, but you know what I mean. Share resources. When you've got a water issue that crosses county lines, probably don't just tackle it by yourself unless your neighbor just doesn't want to help and they outright refuse you. But at least go ask. And vice versa, chip in when you see your neighbor is under attack if you know that half your county is working over in that county at that mill or on that operation to begin with. That's a key thing. So what happened was the county started, in Apache County, I'll pick on us, started seeing this tremendous amount of national and regional scale planning coming down that we were never afforded anything at the table. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to the last point on the previous slide?
Yeah.
Give us your take on why it is that you believe that to be true.
Local governments, the highest and most authoritative we have in our republic, must quit attacking the symptoms and begin attacking the disease, federal encroachment.
Because as a general rule, the general populace doesn't believe that the local government has any powers. And so,
well, per the discussions like I even entertained this morning when you were setting up with people that I'd never met before. I've got a sheriff who's getting a call from a permittee on an issue with his AUMs. The federal agency's not getting those calls. In fact, that agency, most of them don't even know who that guy is, but you guys all knew him by name. Once you popped in on the conversation, you folks know what your school budgets are going through, what your sheriff's department and deputies are going through on budgets or crime rates. The federal agencies do not. And the federal encroachment issue, I don't care on what front it is, whether it's in education mandates, health care, pick your poison, okay, is what it comes down to anymore. The main solution will be complete divestiture of the land to the states from the federal government. That's going to be the #1 solution. But don't be foolish, because that doesn't mean that you're, like we have ADEQ, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and of course we have a Game and Fish, and I already told you about having to lock horns with them. And in Garfield, where I had to help them on a couple issues, but in both cases, the state agency was party, joint lead with the Fed. So don't think that in December 14, the Fed goes, Utah, you know you're right, and your bill was a good idea, here's all your land. Don't think that it's just gonna end, that no one's gonna wanna encumber your water or try to put a funny species in your backyard. So in this process still will be the same. The locals are the experts. And too often what we do is, we've all been guilty of it. We attack the symptoms and not the disease. So the Forest Service, that ranger's an ass and I can't deal with them and they're against the cattle. And then, so this group is here, and the cattlemen that are with me, and they'll be up here this week with me on some meetings and down at hearings in Albuquerque on Friday, these national hearings we have to be at. They'll admit that we threw everybody under the bus 20 years ago to worry about the cattle, because we were so worried under some big attacks that came in the 80s on the logging industries and water, but all we worried about was cattle. And the timber guys only worried about timber. And the recreationists worried about recreationists. And pretty soon they were all decimated. When they're realizing now that the attacks is that massive federal encroachment across the board. And if they would clan up and protect each other's cultural and historic uses in their backyard, they'd get a lot farther. And you local governing officials are the experts. I mean, you know the numbers. The guys in DC that write these plans have no idea what your budgets are like. They don't consider them, they don't care about them, if they even know that your county exists. So the first thing we did in the county was, instead of me being a county employee, Apache County, and I'm going to pick on them heavy since I live there, and my supervisor will be here later, so I'm not being unfair. You can tell them I picked on our county. I have veterans benefits, although they're not very good. I do have them from being stupid and young at one time. So I do have medical, and having Martin Luther King Day off doesn't mean much to me. So I didn't need all those. So what we did was, they contracted with my firm instead of keeping me under the umbrella as a county employee. They saved money, I contracted. I preferred the contracts anyway, because then I get to do one-off jobs like with congressmen, like when I have to do those. It's an issue in an area in their district, and you're done. And that's it, and you walk away. The first thing we had to do though was get the staff better, a little better educated, like what's going on today. Okay, here's what goes on typically. Here's a bunch of things in our backyard. I was able to be more focused because I didn't have a room with different counties and positions that I don't know, really. I mean, I heard you all this morning, but I didn't memorize what you all do. Sheriffs are easy to tell who they are, but and the deputy. But so we said, and then before you knew it, we started hearing back amongst each other, sitting in a room like this after a couple hours. The engineering department had been suffering on roads and didn't even know where it had come from. They just knew that they couldn't go do X, Y, Z anymore up in the forest to get to the in holdings and the human resources and whatnot. So once everybody had the ability to acknowledge what were some of the threats and attacks that had been coming down, and that they had been across multiple departments, it wasn't just engineering, or not just the sheriffs had been absorbing all the angst. We went into and started approaching some of the problems. Now, travel management is a national rule, and the long and short of that is in 2006 it was promulgated after a meeting in San Diego of so-called stakeholders. I doubt any of you were there, helping them develop this plan. Then once it got published, it said the number one cause of degradation in our forest is due to, in our federally managed lands, is due to unmanaged recreation, whatever that means. Well, a big part of what that means is people going out and camping where you want to camp, like we do where we live, to this day. and driving where you need to for big game retrieval or to go get heating fuel wood. So they were sought, and the average is an 86% reduction in road density. Now, the other side of the coin is from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, ASU, Arizona State University, and then our Arizona Game and Fish Department, we have 3 reports showing the multi-billion-dollar industry that our outdoors is to us in agriculture and sightseeing, four-wheeling, hunting, fishing, camping, bird watching, you name it. They went into all these uses, what's called consumptive, timber cutting, non-consumptive, taking a picture of a bird. They're probably still buying gas though and getting hotel rooms. So they have it broke down in all these sub-activities. 76% of the multi-billion-dollar industry in Arizona hinged on the road networks. So are we ready, prepared to cut away 86% of that and throw that away when we're already broke? So what we did was we had to take an aggressive stand against it using that substantive commentary procedure. In our county right now, on our forest, the A-bar-S, we have the part of the Alpine District and all of the Springerville Ranger District. There's 5 districts. Our forest is massive, huge, across 5 counties. In our county, there's no road closures because they know we're going to court if they approach that. The neighboring county, like Coconino County by Flagstaff area, if that helps you, they got hit with close to 90%. And what's crazy is that at our county state association meeting like about 5 years ago, they acted like we were loons that flew in on a broomstick when we were telling them what we were going to do to try to stop these road closures and why they're valuable to the county and the citizens. And then the day it passes and they suddenly find out people can't camp, they can't go, you can't drive out. If you're 80 years old and just shot an elk, a trophy bull, too bad, you better be able to carry it. You're not driving to it, even though you can see it right there. And there's a road here, but you're still not driving to it. And you're not camping anymore out here. And when they started seeing all those impacts to the camping and the gas stations and the motels and all those impacts and the restaurants in Flagstaff, they were screaming overnight. But now they're locked in that corner. They don't have that standing up front. They don't have that administrative record built up. So now they're going to try to appeal as Coconino County, and they've got an uphill battle the whole direction because they never raised a squawk or filed a single letter or anything throughout the whole commentary process. Because they said, well, the Forest Service promised us they won't hurt our economy. I said, did they put it in writing? Well, no, but they told us. Okay, I'm not going to hurt your economy. Are you going to believe me? From some outside agency that rotates leadership every couple years? I mean, come on. So that is one of the benefits of just standing up. What they realized, and as it came right out of Washington, D.C., the Chief Forester's office, it'd be best if we just let this plan die on the vine. Told us to our face when we're sitting in the Chief Forester's office. We, as in the county attorney, the chief, we don't have undersheriff, we have chief deputy, the chairman of the board of supervisors, the county manager, and myself. The largest water grab in Arizona history came about in this period, and there's going to be another wave of that with this West Waters of the U.S. plan that just went to out of the EPA about 3 weeks ago. It's gone to the Office of Management and Budget now for review. And this is kind of like your Clean Water Restoration Act. It's every state in the West will be impacted. It's called like WOOS or something, but it's WOUS, Waters of the U.S. is the title of it. This is horrible. They have in there, like they tried under the Clean Water Restoration Act in 10 and 11, the water running down a bar ditch on the road is navigable, so therefore the Fed has jurisdiction over it. Now, I don't know who's going to run a ferry down the bar ditch, but you don't want to go there with that jurisdiction thing in the water and the federal agencies. So when our round came around, it was the largest amount of claims in Arizona history, and we didn't have a choice but to fight it. It's called a protest system in our state. There's different systems. We use a protest system. So don't think that we went down there with like signs and stood out and yelled and marched. We did all our things, but there was the total, so you can see, we got, a lot of people, I don't deal in acre feet, so I put the gallons. But it's significant, if you know what acre feet are, but there's your gallon equivalent. 298 billion gallons a year they put claim to. Can you imagine that? So, we defeated every one of those claims through the protest process in our state. That was all done by the USDA. But I don't think anybody could stand to lose that much water anywhere. BioBlitz, I already described that. 700 in our area is actually 750 by the time they were done. But 700 is what they first started with. That's a seeking uplisting by overwhelming the agency. They can't do all their paperwork by 90 days, so therefore they failed their duty, so you get to sue them. So you flood them on purpose. Of course, most of the resources were water, and they of course went after cultural and historic uses, in our case like cattle and mining and timber. Here's about our fire. They destroyed enough timber to have kept our largest mill that had 300 people open 24/7 for 21 years. They burned up, or was burned up. Now it's kind of funny, much the justification for the management decisions that created these conditions for a fire you couldn't stop, and it's the same as everywhere in the West. It's destroying the watersheds and the air quality. It was due to protect the spotted owl. The problem is they burned up 86% of the spotted owls in this fire because it was impossible to fight because of the conditions they created. And then we destroyed all the trout fishing, which were featured in magazines every year all around the country and world, and the scenery and all that, and then our ag users and the pumping stations at the res. The RAT team, it's an appropriate name too, and that's their name. But it's from the USDA Forest Service. RAT teams come in and they basically will work 24 hours a day. They'll bring specialists and beg, borrow, and steal within their agency, and they'll work around the clock for about 2 weeks and give you an assessment, or give the agency an assessment. A conservative $110 million in damage just to our forest. That did not include any of our impacts. So the bridges that were pushed completely downstream. It's when you have that much water come off a mountainside that's been burned, pushing concrete bridges down and completely wiping out hillsides and roads, none of that was ever worked in. This is just cost to the Forest Service was $110 million. Okay, and that didn't include firefighting cost. 80%, it was 86% was the total cumulative number. Destroying our tourism and watershed industries. We didn't have much choice but to fight back on this one. We forced roadside salvage sales, which was the first step, and that helped some of our small timber users that had to close down for lack of supply to get back in the game. Because finally they had a supply that was easy to access and they could turn into some money right now. So we did a system on each side of the road, because if we can get the roads back open for the hunting and tourism and fishing and cattle, we can get people back up on the mountain working, whatever industry they're in. I got the 10 million board feet right from our forest supervisor. Yeah, it's not a lot, but it's a lot when it's only in 2 districts out of the whole U.S. That's a tremendous amount. When they hardly talking millions of board feet in some states nowadays.
On that, could you mind drilling down just a little bit? How did Apache County get those agencies into that posture?
Sure, I'll show you that. A good question, because I was going to do like with the initials and stuff and just skip on through. We did 2 or 3 things. And I'll show you, here's the proof. Here is from Cronkite News. We're cited as a cure for the disease of growing wildfires. This is off the congressional hearings on the floor. Congressman Gosar, Tipton, of course, Bishop was the chair at that particular hearing. Your bishop. So I only showed some of these news articles is because 3 weeks ago in Northern California and Southern Oregon at some hearings, a supervisor actually, forest supervisor, stood up and told those counties to refute us that this right here that's signed and all that this didn't exist and never happened. It's amazing the length people will lie to. So I wanted to show you the news articles too that the hearings happened in case that ever came up. What we had to do was we declared an emergency, which the county has a right to do. We did one on federal lands, federally managed lands is really the key, and then our road networks, this one. And this one, the Sheriff's Department, the Search and Rescue, and the posse weighed in heavy on the authorship of this particular resolution here. And it didn't have a number. Well, that's got a number. I think that one was 12. I'd have to look it up. But basically, to your question, we'll go back to the land one. What we did was we cited the easily provable current history, recent history. Look, we've suffered through this, we've had these losses, we're still suffering this. This, and this action has caused these, and it's indisputable, so here's what we need to do. We're going to notice everybody, whether you be governors, that the governor and the Arizona Division of Emergency Management, blah, blah, blah. Tell everybody your problem. The day after these were signed by the Board of Supervisors on a Tuesday, Wednesday I'm at the state capitol, having meetings with the governor and her chief of staff and the Department of Ag, Fish and Game, briefing them. Here's why we did it. Here's what we did. Here's your free color copy. Okay? So, the next step, and in here we said the agencies better be over here ASAP. So, the next day, Wednesday, while I'm down there, the county manager's office and the board is sending letters to every agency that we've named in here, saying, here's the dates. We're open for these dates and times. You need to come sit with us and talk. Figure out how are we going to fix this problem. Don't leave it up to them to pick a date and time. Tell them what dates work good and get them in your building. And that included some state agencies like our Game and Fish, who hasn't always been the best working with us, and our state forestry. Okay, so there's when we got them at the table. When we said, what stops you when you have the right to do salvage sales after a catastrophic event? What is going to stop us from getting these board feet off the forest now? Because right now, Washington, D.C. has flown in here and said the ideal situation would be just to close the entire forest for 2 to 5 years. That's what the head of the bear team and the head of the rat team said right out of the forest chief's office, Tidwell's. Well, we said that's not going to happen. So either we're going to be arresting you or you're going to try to be arresting us, but that's not going to happen. So how do we work on this? Well, immediately upon being pushed, when we said, here's what we're passing, here's the list of dates, come meet with us. We'll even pick a mutually, spots. We picked the Eager Town Hall, a city building. And here's the forest. We said, all you guys bring maps, we're bringing all our stuff, let's talk. We sat down, they said, well, actually, there's nothing stopping us. And we said, well, we already know that. It says in your manual you're allowed to do basically untold number of things without NEPA documents after a disaster. So start doing it. So what they did was our forest supervisors, which was one leaving and one kind of standing in for a while until he was officially it, they really leaned on forest throughout the region and got in extra timber marking teams and mapping specialists, and they literally drove all daylight hours 7 days a week. 7 days a week literally, to get as many cells as we could marked. And then they used all the exemptions they legally have at their disposal to get them out to the regular public bidding process. Because you can have sealed or open bids either way.
What would you have done? What could you have done if they'd have said, no, I'm sorry, we're in charge of this process, you are not in charge of this process, we're going to decide what happens here, not you. And then what do you do?
That was it with both these resolutions. Our sheriff and all of us, we went and briefed them and said, look, if you're not willing to sit down at the table immediately, if you start closing down gates and closing down the forest, you will be arrested and we're bulldozing the gates.
Okay.
Under the name of health, safety, and welfare.
Didn't your road resolution spell out that was a Class A misdemeanor, imprisonable?
Yeah, that's this other one here. Yeah, it laid it all, and it was all legal. The state AG's office said, well, you guys are still as wild up there as always, but yeah, everything's legal. So, but yeah, we just laid it out to them, and we just had to have a sit down with them and tell them, look, if you are, everything that's happening right now, look, we're pumping stations, we've got people with no running water, including hospitals. We've got road networks that are closed because of fire and now post-fire flooding. And we have $1 billion industry in the form of elk hunting and fishing and camping and all that. So we need to get this open now, and people need jobs. And what do we got sitting around? We have some shut down mills. So Nutrioso Mill, one of the oldest in the state of Arizona, it even had its power loop removed to save that monthly charge. They got back on board, and we're running 2 shifts, 6 days a week, Sundays off, of course. We have a little tongue and groove mill. That's all they do is tongue and groove interior and exterior siding for homes out by our airport. Then the Reedhead Brothers mill by our dump, transfer station, whether I call it a dump still. Then they got to fire back up. And I can take you out there, if we were down there, I could take you out there right now and show you the 30 guys out there sorting and stacking lumber. Then this high-speed mill unit that moved in from the state of Washington, one of the biggest national concerns are in the timber industry still. And they said the reason we're coming down here is because you've made it where we can go to work again. So a lot of what we do in this role, and maybe like what we're talking about today, is just running defense for our locals in the name of critters and agencies and water and whatever.
Just a comment, we've had this conversation with the Forest Service a number of times about what does it take? And they say, well, you don't have any industry to come in. And I said, the reason we don't have any industry is because you guys don't have a continuing
Supply.
A continuing supply of wood. And who's going to come in and spend $1 million or $2 million or 40 trying to set up a mill when there's the probability that you're not going to have an ongoing supply? And they said, well, we can't help you. That was the conversation basically that we had in Cedar here just a couple of months ago. We really can't solve that problem. I said, until you solve that problem, then the private sector will not risk capital to invest in a mill. So what you've basically done is solve that problem.
To a great extent, and it wasn't easy. We didn't just pass this resolution and all sing kumbaya. I mean, the Fed said, well, we're coming in, by the way, and we're gonna arrest you, Doyle, for writing this, and you, supervisor, for ramrodding it, and you, sheriff. And then they said, no, we're gonna arrest all of you, so don't bother coming here. Okay? So we went to regional in Albuquerque, and then Tidwell's office. I mean, it took both those trips too. And I mean, so like my little flight and hotel to DC and back was like $1,100-1,200. I mean, that's a lot of money to me.
But when push came to shove, the Fed backed down.
Yes. We had them on health, safety, welfare. In fact, sitting at the table, drawing the maps and developing the process for one of these big timber sales in the Alpine District. I have the unfortunate situation of having the headquarters and many of the founding people of the Center for Biological Diversity. The founder lives where I live, Todd Schultze, the co-founder, and he's at every meeting. Okay. Now, if any of you are members, make sure when you relay what I'm bad-mouthing them about, relay it accurately. If any of you are members, because usually what I say about him gets to them wrong. The Center for Biological Diversity headquarters there, the Nature Conservancy, Wild Earth Guardians, they all have offices because of Tucson. Tucson is like, I don't know, it's its own state. So even the co-founder, Todd Schultze, and President Emeritus, everything, at the table in front of everybody said we would be fools to take on health, safety, and welfare issue against a county. And this plan, if we all agree today on this map and how we drew it, my sheriff's there, tons of people are there, this plan will not be protested or litigated, I can promise you that. And by God, when it came out for public review, 30-day comment period, they didn't write a single letter because they don't want that in court. What's the center going to do if they actually try to take on health, safety, and welfare declaration the county's made? A 10th Amendment case. They're not ready for that, okay, to get that in court. So,
to be clear, it's not the county taking on the actual contract and doing the administration and the work on that.
We did one that nobody wanted to touch, the spotted owl core habitat.
So it's Forest Service.
No private.
No, I mean, as far as the contract, the entity doing the contract.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And was there any NEPA done on this thing, or was it all done by categorical exclusion?
Well, there are no categorical exclusions anymore, thanks to the center. But they do have what they can do in catastrophic conditions, which are like CEs. Then regular timber sales with regular marking, notice of 10 days, which is all the law requires, and then sealed and open bid, just like the old days. All we wanted to do was run scrimmage to make jobs and make our place safe again. The county doesn't want to get in the timber industry. Now the spotted owl pack, the core protected area, okay, now that's 100 acres around every nesting site in America. Typically you'll hear that, well, this owl and this owl shut down all the timber or all the grazing or whatever, right? Wrong. Read, how many people have actually read the spotted owl management plan? It says in there, the pack consists of 100 acres is all, and even the 100 acres, 20% per year you can cut. So that means you would be cutting the core spotted owl area, the only restricted zone, 100% over a 5-year window. None of our national forests get that treatment, from seamless treatment from one end to the other. Okay, so you can't. And we had the fish and wildlife directors in our county for free. They wouldn't even let me buy their lunch. Teach us how to do that when we went after that one. And we did that 86-acre cut because no private guy, they all said, now you've really gone loony, Mr. Apache County. You're going to get sued in non-existence cutting a protected area.
Did you have public hearings on your 2 resolutions?
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about that, what happened there.
Well, we just, first, the meeting prior, according to our rules, so 2 weeks prior on the agenda, we showed an intention that we were probably going to do these issues. So we wanted public input. Then we posted this resolution as you see it on the website and then at the post offices, our normal routine, the week before. So agenda reviews on Wednesday, the week previous to the Tuesday meeting, and everything's published that day by noon. So everybody could come in, and we knew it would be a brutal meeting, so we left plenty of time and didn't put much else on the agenda. We didn't try to worry about potholes and all that other stuff that day, because it's going to be a long meeting. And surprisingly, we had 2 eco-Nazis from New Triosa show up, which I expected these 2 ladies to show up because they show up to everything. And other than that, the meeting drug on forever when people support. We had ranchers that I don't see once a year show up to a meeting. They've never been to a meeting. We had timber users, the people that use the water for the mines drove from 3 counties away to support us. That's what we got, and that's what took so damn long, even with the 3-minute limit. And so then it was passed unanimously. That includes 2/3 of my board is Navajo Nation. So a lot of people thought that was bizarre. Actually, everything I've shown you today has been passed unanimously. In fact, if anything, a lot of these actions have gotten rid of a lot of the, what I call north-south, and we all do. In our case, because it is north up here of our county, is Navajo Nation, and down here's whatever you want to call it, non-Navajo. And we've gotten rid of a lot of the traditional conflicts because we've come to realize that we had a common problem in a lot of areas, and it was these agencies. Because like the Navajos understood after a few maps and discussions that the water we're protecting flows downhill, and they're downhill from me. So they had a dog in the fight. The sheriff had it.
Yeah, I was wondering, where do you get the money to fight this, to do all this stuff that you're doing?
Well, actually, not one of these has been litigated.
So I mean, so the county just hired you and your firm to do this stuff?
Yeah. And some of the operations are under general fund because they choose to do travel. If they send me out of state travel, to do that out of a different fund, not call it hourly, just straight, here's your plane ticket and here's what it costs, and we're going to keep, you have this much per year. The other stuff is based on an hourly basis, and then whenever we can cost share, we do. Like the willow flycatcher is a bird that gets used against livestock throughout the West often. So Catron County, Greenlee County, Donna Ana, Hidalgo, and us. So 5 New Mexico and us teamed up. So when we touched the New Mexico border and we're a long, narrow county, So we touch a couple, 3 New Mexico counties. But we're all the same. We don't pay attention to the state line. We teamed up, and that was like $1,000 project when it was done. But every county got the letter, and we divided it by 6 ways. So it didn't cost hardly anything.
Doyle, one of the things that I get when I mention the things that you've done down there is, well, yeah, they got all that done because they had that big fire. And I guess the question is, do we need a big fire? Because I really don't want the fire. You know?
No, you don't. You want to avoid it.
So is any of this that you accomplished because of the after effects of the fire?
But some of it, yeah. And
or is it something you feel we can just move forward?
Well, you can move forward on a lot of it because protecting like the water, and then like this last 11,000 acre timber sale, it was called, it came under stewardship. And in December, this past December, at like 10 at night, the local supervisor, the local supervisor of our forest, Jim, called me and emailed and said, Doyle, we got a big problem. The highway departments have shut down all the weight limits on the highways to 23,000, which is less than an empty truck. So they shut down the operation is what they did, playing with road weights. So I called everybody, which they're pretty open to if it's an emergency. We met the next morning at the county annex, branched out, we went down to the governor's office, we got the details. There was the Forest Service calling us for help, because they know they need to get this cut and going. This is 2 weeks before Christmas. 300 men and women are relying on this work. Direct impacts at the mills, trucking, everything, let alone the families. And this comes down. So he wanted to see it keep going, but he can't do anything. As a forest supervisor, he can't go directly engage the Department of Transportation at federal or state, either one, and all these different entities. It's this one of these kind of funny clauses in the Forest Service, and we know that. So we ran scrimmage because it's our people and our jobs. And what it culminated in was once we educated a few of the Navajo senators and legislators and the governor's staff, she just did a governor's executive over and overrode all the weight limit restrictions and raised them all right back up to 80 like normal America, like they had always been, so we could proceed forward. And that project just finished up, that 11,000 acres.
See, the problem that we're facing here, is we've got this aspen degeneration, regeneration that they're trying to push onto the ranchers and the sage grouse that's coming up. That if they get that on, it's gonna totally do away with our grazing.
Correct. I know. The sage grouse is the new spotted owl. Plain and simple.
So, I mean, that's something that we're looking at in our county, along with the timber industry that, I mean, Kaibab used to hire, I don't know, they probably had towards 1,000 jobs between here and Fredonia. And we have no sawmills. We have one little sawmill.
Yeah, we had to reinvigorate an industry. It's hard. And when we started trying to get truckers, it was amazing. The Simpsons, one of the last big log trucking firms, Danny Simpson, he forgot how bad his equipment, the shape it got into when he was only running 2 or 3 trucks, and now he needed dozens again. And the mills and our bridges and road networks, but it didn't matter because we've made a lot of jobs about. And in fact, for economic ingenuity, I don't get any of these awards. Everything I do is always in the name of the elected official. So like when I did all these security briefings recently about disease spread and Al-Qaeda, it's Bishop and all them, they get the credit. I'm just the guy in the back giving them what to say. Okay? But let me show you this one down this way. Oh, here's one of your esteemed legislators. I made him work. He came to visit, was at my house, Ivory. And we found a wildcat fire, ironically, when I was giving him a survey of our fire. We actually found one someone left. And that wasn't a staged photo. I said, get that damn shovel out of my truck and start running it. And he was all pretty and clean. Look at him. They work for us, remember? Here's the county summit. Well, they're supposed to in a republic. For the county stewardship program, I know you can't really see that, but sorry about that. Right here, County and economic development for the implementation of innovative solutions to community challenges through the county stewardship program. And this went through a national peer-reviewed panel when we got this from the Association of Counties last year. Because they had to prove it out. There was an economist, a lawyer, etc., to prove out our claims. Now, we didn't even make the claim. Someone put us in for this award. I actually don't know to this day if it was a forester or what. But they award the plaques. It's hanging in somebody's office. I don't know who. There's a picture. And the county manager sent me that picture when I was out in California. Actually, right before Ogden, because I wanted to show Mark or someone. So, you can do it, and the revenues pay for themselves. Because there's.
How do you get started?
I'm telling you, the sage grouse is the nail in the coffin in the West. And myself, and I'm telling you, I'm not saying this to get a job. Me and my friends talk all the time. We have to, or we can't stay ahead of things and try to win all the time. And we don't win all the time. We just win a lot. The sage grouse is the biggest threat to the West with the wolf. Those two species are the two most illegitimate species we've seen in U.S. Fish and Wildlife history. Neither one of them are bona fide subspecies. Both of them have no science or economic data backing them. They're ripe for litigation at the ESA level, and it's only going to happen as if a bunch of counties team up and sue.
So, I'm just wrapping my head around your process. It sounds to me like in your toolkit, you've got you're watching for the federal plans to come out and you're doing substantive comments.
Yeah.
And you're having significant success there.
Yeah.
The health, safety, welfare resolutions are kind of another tool.
Correct,
that
sir.
you use to get people at the table and to make things start happening
To make
when
it
you're
happen.
being ignored.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because if they don't want to listen to my nice letter, like we were pleased to comment today and all that, then you bring out the 2x4, the resolutions or the ordinances, like we recently did, where the wolves are a direct threat because of disease. We've got them tracking kids at schools when their parents are letting them off. Our neighboring county, and I can show you the pictures, has to have the kids wait in cages at the bus stops because of the wolves stalking them. I can show you the pictures. It's that bad with these wolves. So we passed a full-blown ordinance and briefed everybody to the top on it, face to face. The wolves are a threat to us, and we're going to start killing them. And of course, they all say, hey, it's a threatened species. Well, so is the human, and so are jobs.
And so are you.
Darren had.
Isn't it jurisdiction is another big piece of what
Mm-hmm.
we usually talk about?
Yeah.
We haven't touched much on yet.
No, I was going to do that right after this break because I have those charts are next.
Okay.
And I wanted to show you those, like by county. So I would say pick an issue, and if I was you all, my Okie's coming out in me. I would pick on the sage grouse wolves, because the wolves are hitting southern Utah. Fish and Wildlife can tell you what they want. They've already been verified. They're on all of our northern boundaries of our Navajo Nation, which I'm your neighbor. They've already been killed, DNA proofed out in Kansas and West Texas, and they've already been mapped and charted coming in to every state around Colorado. So I don't care if you're not part of the wolf program, you're part of it, whether you want to be or not. So, but that's a really good species that's weak, and I think a bunch of counties pulling their assets together to constantly run that scrimmage, that toolkit, that's a great word, and then use the 2x4 when you have to. But on a bigger picture, this sage grouse needs to be attacked across the West, and don't wait for the legislators. I'm telling you, don't wait for him. Mr. Bishop's a nice guy and all, but don't wait for him. He's too busy bargaining away your land right now. Tipton's a nice guy in Colorado, but he went in, it's worth $700,000. He's $11.8 million now, and he's only a one-termer. So the counties are the key. Let's take a break, and then I want to get into that jurisdiction and these. Oh, sir, sorry.
You follow up on Darren's question. You mentioned that it doesn't take. Well, as you're talking about getting your forest industry, it sounded like because of the catastrophic fire, you had, the Forest Service had some sanity back into their policy. But if you haven't had the fire,
We had
they have those options.
we had done the road one before any fires. That was written in 2006, and our fire was 11, and 400 species, things like that. Writing plans for management, or this national stewardship, which is congressionally authorized stewardship. It's not a program of the Forest Service. It's an actual congressional act. That's 10 years old now.
But we have a fire just waiting to happen.
Yeah, you do, and that's what you use, and that's why in our resolution's imminent threat.
Okay.
We can prove the fuel
So that's
load.
what we say.
That's what you say. Your fuel load here should be like 7 tons per acre, and much of your fuel load out here is over 70. Tenfold.
This might sound like a dumb question, but why not use the 2 befores, not be nice, because they're not being nice with us. Why not use the 2 before first?
Well, we typically actually do. I was trying to put on a nice face today, but the letters though, if the plan comes out like this morning, there was some things from the EPA for my neighboring county. I tipped them off to it because I know they're not reading it. And this power plant employs 1,400 people, and it's like their biggest employer next door to us. There's not a 2x4 to use yet. They're just because they've only made an announcement. But you can write a letter. Yeah, you're right. You've got the 2x4, health, safety, and welfare. Everybody sitting in here has it.